In the name of God, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. Please be seated. You've probably already heard me say, perhaps way too many times, that the grace of God comes to you as your life. The grace of God comes to you as your life. The grace of God comes to me as my life. The grace of God comes to us as our lives and as our life together. If we're honest, if we're genuine, if we're truthful, if we're real, we should know and admit that the only thing we can know and admit about God is what we know from our own experience of God, what we know from our personal lived experience of God. This is not a head trip. It's a journey of the heart and the soul. The mystery we call God is a relationship. And our relationship with God is the basis of our lived experience of God. It's the exact same thing as being in love, because it is being in love. And it's all about experience. Because you can talk to other people about their experiences of love. You can watch videos and hear podcasts about love. You can read every book ever written in the history of humankind about love. You can take college and graduate level courses about love. You can look at beautiful artwork and listen to magnificent symphonies about love. You can do all that and more. But if you don't have actual experience of love, you won't have a clue. Not really. And it's the exact same way with God. Now, I know from talking to so many people for so many years about their spirituality and their relationships with God, I know that many people don't even think that they have an experience of God. They don't even know that they have a relationship with God. And that's just plain silly. I mean, I'm not trying to be fresh for a change, but really and truly, it's just plain silly. People think that way because they haven't yet come to understand that the grace of God comes to them as their life, So if you are sitting there looking at me, you are having a lived experience of God. Not because I'm so cool, but because it's all so cool. If you, if you opened your eyes and you got out of bed this morning, you're having a lived experience of God. If you're alive and breathing and your heart is beating, you are having a lived experience of God. Every breath, every heartbeat is all the evidence any of us ever needs that we are being held in existence by the love that calls all things into being. The grace of God comes to you as your life. At the end of today's gospel reading, Jesus says to the leper who was healed, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The leper's experience of God in the healing love of Jesus is what made him well. There are so many other places in the Gospels where we have the same sort of thing going on. There are so many times throughout the 4 Gospel accounts when Jesus says, "Your faith has made you well." Or even more frequently, he says, "Your faith has saved you." Our faith, our experience of God, our experience of God's love is what heals us and saves us and makes us whole. And so I'm not just saying that in the sense that we are out of luck because we're not fortunate enough to have been around 2,000 years ago when the Christ was incarnate in Jesus of Nazareth. The Christ is incarnate in all of creation, from before the beginning until after the end of time. We are literally surrounded by the grace of God. Part of my job as a clergy person and as a spiritual director is to help people reflect theologically on their own lives, to help them see God in their own lives, to help them recognize the fact that the grace of God comes to them as their life. And so maybe I should just speak from my personal experience for a minute to say, with absolute trust in the goodness and mercy and presence of God, that I am healed every time someone else reaches out to love me, or to help me, or to care for me. Every time. I am saved every time I reach out to love, or to help, or to care for someone else. Every time. I am made whole every time I watch a beautiful sunset or sunrise, or sit in silent meditation, or go for a peaceful walk in the woods, or hold someone's hand while they're grieving or dying. Every time. I could go on forever, and I will, but not now. The grace of God comes to you as your life. Once we learn to see that every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of our life is an experience of God, we are healed, we are saved, we are made whole. And we can heal and save and help others be made whole by sharing this wisdom about life with them. Just like the healed leper in today's gospel reading, it's our lived experience of God and God's love that changes us. And it enables us to change others, and so to change the world. And just like, the healed leper in today's gospel reading, sometimes our lived experience is not all happiness and butterflies. Sometimes life is hard, really hard. So what about that? If the grace of God comes to me as my life, what about when what comes to me is hard, really hard? What about that? Parker Palmer is a famous author and speaker and social justice advocate. He has written many really wonderful books about spirituality. His latest is called On the Brink of Everything, and it's really, really wonderful. Parker is a devoted Quaker, and he is steeped in the wisdom of that very wise spiritual tradition. He also speaks and writes very openly of the challenges that he faces in living with severe bouts of clinical depression. I heard him speak about this in a recent interview. He talked about how he has had to deal with severe depression for most of his adult life, and that there were 3 times when the depression was particularly deep and long and devastating. The last of these 3 times, he says, was the worst. He spent days and weeks and months sitting in the dark, in his home, in a chair, unwilling and unable to get out of his pajamas, or to leave the house, or even to take care of himself at all. During that time, a kindly friend from his Quaker meeting group would come to sit with him daily, for weeks, for months. And he would just come and sit with him in the silence. Quakers are very good at that, you know. That's how they pray for the most part. Even when they pray together, they pray in silence. So sometimes his daily visitor friend would speak quietly and sparingly. Sometimes he would hold Parker's hand, or sing to him softly, or even rub his feet, just so he could remember he had a body. Every day, for weeks, for months. Finally, after a very long time, the depression began to lighten, and then to break open. And then it lifted, and then it was over. Parker Palmer says that because of this experience, he is now understanding of, by experience, the experience of death and resurrection. He understands about death and resurrection. In his severe depression, he experienced a profound kind of death. And in his coming back around to mental and emotional health, he experienced a profound kind of resurrection. He came back to life. He experienced resurrection. The grace of God comes to you as your life, even when it's hard. Our faith is in an incarnate God, a living God. Our faith is in the way of God's incarnate word, and it's a living, breathing, and fleshed experience of life with God. This is not a head trip. It's a journey of the heart and soul. The grace of God comes to you as your life. It worked that way for the leper who was healed in this morning's gospel reading. It worked that way for Parker Palmer in his struggle with depression. And it works that way for all of us in every single moment of our lives. It's not a head trip. It's a journey of the heart and soul. And it's quite an adventure, to be sure. The grace of God comes to you as your life.